CEO of Roivant Sciences. That's a pharmaceutical company. He also serves on Ohio's coronavirus response team. We're happy to have him on tonight. Vic, thanks so much for coming on. So what have you, so you're in the business of science, you run a pharma company, you are a scientist. What have you learned from all of this?
Well, I'd say one thing I'd like to start with, Tucker, is I'd actually like to salute my wife and her colleagues who've been treating patients on the front line. You and I were chatting earlier. We had a baby in February. My wife, was a doctor and faced one of the most difficult choices of her life, of whether to take maternity leave with our son or to go back to the hospital at the peak of this pandemic. And she ultimately decided to go back out of a sense of duty and was infected with COVID and has now been separated from our baby son. Now, it's taught me, I think, that first thing I got to say is I got to salute our healthcare providers on the front line who are our true national heroes, right? But I'm happy to talk to you more about the other lessons we've learned, Tucker, as well as the therapeutic landscape.
Well, I certainly am amazed by the decision that she made. Good for her and for all of those people. I wonder if this is going to change the country. I mean, we're all agreed on that. And the question is how? What kind of country will we wind up with when the smoke clears, do you think?
So look, I'm speaking as a citizen here and not as just a company leader developing a drug. I think that this crisis gives us a rare opportunity to rediscover our shared American identity. As a country, we spent the last decade celebrating our diversity and our differences. In the next decade, I think we ought to use this as a bookend to begin to celebrate once again our commonality as a people. In some ways, this virus reminds us that our greatest vulnerabilities aren't the microaggressions that one group commits against another, but rather the macroaggressions that we face together as one people. And as best we know, COVID-19 can infect you, whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white, whether you're gay or straight, whether you're Democrat or Republican, for that matter. And I think in any moment of national crisis, it's important to ground ourselves in what we actually share in common. We do hear the siren song of authoritarianism. I heard you talking about it earlier on the show. We're starting to hear it now. During the Great Depression, I think history teaches us a lot. Some people complimented the efficiency of Nazi Germany. During the Cold War, when the USSR beat us into space, some Americans preached about the strengths of Soviet collectivism. And in the current crisis, we're starting to hear whispers that America could succeed by being more like China. In my view, nothing could be further from the truth. And I think that America is defined by our ability to resist that siren song. So I hope we come out, Tucker, out of this crisis with a renewed sense of that shared American identity, not around our shared genetics, but instead around our shared values. And that's what I'd like to see in post-COVID America.
Amen. I mean, I think it's a beautiful sentiment, not overstating it. I really think that's the most important thing that we can learn from all of this is that people of all kinds are dying. And I wonder why, and people of all kinds are also uniting. And I wonder why we're not hearing that more often.
Well, look, I think we got to see the space. Right now, people are in a place where they're still not sure what the path to normalcy looks like. And speaking from the seat that I'm in, maybe I could just offer a little bit of a perspective there where, look, I think a vaccine would be great. I think people are holding out hope for that. I don't think our national strategy can depend on it. But I do think that small hits along the way can give people a better sense of hope so that we're able to be strengthened by this crisis. We saw in the last couple of weeks an emergency use authorization for a new drug by FDA. Now, keep in mind, this is something important for people to keep in mind, a fact that for over 80% of the people infected with this coronavirus, it's actually no worse than the flu. The thing that distinguishes this virus is that up to 20% of infected patients require hospitalization. And the thing that kills you for people who go into the hospital is often the immune response and not the presence of the virus itself. And so if we can get some base hits along the way, if you could just address that for the severe patients in the hospital, then our whole societal response to this pandemic could actually become much more measured, similar to that of the seasonal flu. And even though that's a modest proposal, it's also potentially more achievable in the near term than waiting for a vaccine in the long run. So to answer your question, Tucker, I'm an optimist. I think that a few base hits along the way will get us right back on track to the right attitude.
So really quickly, in 30 seconds, you're saying that if we had effective treatments that helped some significant percentage of the 20% who wind up hospitalized, that our whole outlook would change, and you think that could happen?
I think from a societal standpoint, I can't tell you which drug it's going to be right now. That's why we do clinical trials. But I think that there are enough shots on goal that, yes, I think that's a likely nearer-term achievable goal. The vaccine's the holy grail, but there's never been a vaccine developed that I'm aware of in less than 2 years. So treatments that address the people who are hospitalized can really change the game here, even if they're not a cure for all people who are infected. That could really change the cost-benefit analysis.
Coming from someone who runs a drug company, that's really hopeful news. Vivek, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.